with Octavio Ferraz, who's a professor of law at King's College London. Welcome to the program, Octavio. Is the Brazilian Supreme Court independent? Because if it was anything to do with the president, presumably the Supreme Court would fall its judgment against the indigenous peoples.
Thanks for having me. Well, that's a very good question. At the moment, the president has only nominated one of the 11 judges. So I would think that the Supreme Court is still independent and capable of taking a decision here which is not influenced by the president.
These numbers are crazy. They come from the Catholic Church's Indigenous Missionary Council, and you'll know them, but I just want to illustrate them for the viewer. Since Bolsonaro took office in 2019, deforestation has soared nearly 50% in 2 years. Since November 2019, 5 indigenous leaders were murdered in areas dominated by powerful landowners. And despite that situation, fines for environmental crimes dropped by 42% in the Amazon basin in 2019. Is that all Bolsonaro's doing, or is there something else going on?
Well, destruction of the environment in Brazil has always been a problem throughout all governments, but Bolsonaro's government is clearly one of the worst ones in this respect, if not the worst one, and was openly so. So it's no surprise here. He said throughout the campaign that he wanted the indigenous lands and also forests to be exploited for mining, for large agricultural projects. So no one can say, at least, that they were conned by a president who said he was going to protect the environment and then decided not to. His first environmental minister, who is luckily now gone, was again clearly in favor of large agricultural projects rather than the preservation of the forest. So yes, the situation is dire, much worse than it has ever been. But we cannot say that before it was great either. It's always been a problem in Brazil, the environmental protection.
I mean, when you look at this particular case and the issue of the large landowners and the government saying that actually we'll only give you the rights to those indigenous lands if you were there at a certain moment in time. I mean, how do you see the judgment possibly going?
Well, I think Article 231 of the Constitution is very clear that it wanted to protect indigenous people's right to land. And if this absurd thesis that it's only if they were there at that particular moment when the Constitution was adopted that they can claim the land, if that goes forward, it's obviously turning the Constitution into protective of indigenous rights, into destructive of those rights, violating those rights. So I cannot see how a judgment can go in favor of this thesis of the so-called time limit for claims. But anything is possible under the current circumstances in Brazil, as you know, like a very difficult political crisis. Democracy is at risk. Things can happen. But I don't believe that this current Supreme Court, with only one justice being nominated by Bolsonaro, is going to do this disservice to the protection of indigenous rights and the environment in Brazil, as your piece very well made clear there. It's not about indigenous rights only, it's also about the protection of the environment.
Octavio, we're going to look out very carefully for the judgment from the Supreme Court, and thanks a lot for talking us through it. Octavio Ferraz from King's College London.